Welcome back into the Dynasty Nerds YouTube page. I'm Garret Price here to discuss Odell Beckham Jr. to the Rams. Now, at first glance, this is an early knee jerk. We haven't seen him play or anything yet, but I want to give some thoughts on Odell Beckham and what this means for him and what it means for the pieces around him. So let's start off with Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford now gets a guy that was formerly a top five, maybe even someone would have considered him as the top wide receiver in football. Now, his last couple of years with the Giants, his last couple of years with the Browns haven't been so great. But anytime you add more weapons, that's never going to hurt your quarterback. So overall, I would say this is arrow up, unless he makes some drama or some idiot things. But they've got a good enough system out there with McVay. They've got a veteran quarterback in Stafford. I don't anticipate any problems that would translate to problems on the field for the quarterback. So this is arrow up for Matthew Stafford. Running game wise, I don't think they're going to be passing that much more just because of Odell Beckham Jr. I think that remains relatively unaffected. Let's get to the other wide receivers. Cooper Kupp has been an absolute monster this season. I don't think this is going to affect him much. He has an incredibly high target percentage already. He is now on pace for the highest reception total, yards, and touchdowns in the NFL. If it affects him, it's going to be very minor. There's such good chemistry, and he is such a good security blanket, deep threat, whatever, any and all things that you want to classify as Cooper Kupp, they're probably accurate. He's going to remain as a top five fantasy football receiver. This will not change much because of the Odell Beckham Jr. news. Where it does affect things a little bit more is for Van Jefferson. Van Jefferson was getting a little bit of boost in playing time this year. We see him doing a lot more with the departure of Josh Reynolds. But now I'm guessing that this is going to cut into his workload a decent amount. We're going to see Odell Beckham Jr. probably line up as the X more often than not, but we've seen him play the slot. We've seen him play the Z. He can play all over the place. So it's tough to say exactly where he's going to play, but he's going to get playing time within the next 2 to 3 weeks here. He will be a part of this offense. So I think Van Jefferson is probably the odd man out. As far as Robert Woods goes, I know a lot of people think that this is going to drastically negatively affect him, but let's remember Robert Woods has been doing a lot of low ADOT stuff, a lot of stuff closer to the line of scrimmage, a lot of crossing routes, a lot of slants, things over the middle. I still think it's going to be most of that. So I think it's going to be Robert Woods maybe a tick down, but I still think we're just moving from a mid wide receiver 2 to maybe a low end wide receiver 2. Cooper Kupp's going to remain the same, but it's going to more or less kill any fantasy impact this year for Van Jefferson. With this move, now LA looks to be primed to be one of the main Super Bowl contenders. We already saw them add Von Miller. They made some moves in the offseason, obviously Matthew Stafford being the biggest of those moves. And if this team dares get Cam Akers back and healthy by the postseason run, they really could be looking at a Super Bowl.